Hey everyone, Todd Schutte with the Bona e-learning team.
And I'm Dee Linston with the Tech and Training team.
Hey, welcome to part 2 of our webinar series on Bona Systems. So today, Dee and I are going to talk about more about the Bona Systems. We're going to cover machines and abrasives and adhesives, 3 real key components. We talked a little bit about on the part 1, water-based finishes, sealers, dust containment, and just the importance of systems in general. So let's just, as a recap, tell us again, what the discussion is in the schools when you guys are talking about systems.
Sure, we get a lot of guys that come to the training, they have their own system, and so we really try to stress the importance of sticking to one manufacturer system. So we really drive home why the Bona system is important, why they shouldn't mix and match different manufacturer products. And for the most part, I would say they definitely get it by the end of, day 3 at the end of the school. They totally understand that why the mixing and matching is not good. It gives you one point of contact if there's any troubleshooting that needs to happen versus having to, work with different manufacturers.
The way I think of it sometimes is if I've got a Ford truck, got to put a Chevy engine in it. It's got Toyota suspension. I got a Dodge transmission. I take it to Mercedes to get serviced. That's not a good system to have. Or would a guy run his business, have one company come in and sand, one company come in and edge, somebody else come in and buff? That's not a system, but that's kind of the same chance you're taking if you're using different filler, different stain, different sealer, different finish. You don't educate about floor care. So by having a whole system, I think we can really help the contractor have a lot more trust and confidence in what he's doing and take that out of his worry zone for him. And it's also a way for the customer to trust them more. So tell us more then about building that trust with the customer and closing the loop, and again, using Bona products, what we can do there.
Sure, we're probably one of the only manufacturers that has a complete system. I mean, even from install standpoint with our adhesives, which we'll talk a little bit later about. But when you're using a system approach, and it really helps the homeowner to know that you're using one complete system, and as part of that system, we also have floor care as a way to maintain that floor. And if you can help educate that homeowner on why floor care is important, then that really sets you up for coming back and doing a recoat later in hopes that they're only using the Bona cleaners, and therefore that you'll be able to recoat those floors and have a better chance of having success versus leaving it up to them to go out there and choose anything, in hopes that you become their hardwood flooring professional. They don't go out and call somebody else to do different aspects of that job, but now you have the recoat, you can go back and resand when it's time to have that done, and it's all in that one Bona family of products, the system.
Yeah, we also know that, again, having the huge retail presence, having all the Bona mops and cleaners out there, that a lot of homeowners or business owners, wherever they're getting their floors done, they know that Bona name because they use our cleaner, they've used our mops, or at least they've seen that at the retail sites. So again, if I'm a contractor and I can go in and talk about a product that hopefully that customer already knows, uses, and trusts, and I'm like, great. I'm also taking all those products and using them through my whole professional system on your floor. It's got to build a lot more trust and credibility with that homeowner too.
I would say it should be an easy sell for that contractor as well, especially for those consumers that know the Bona cleaners, because as you mentioned, our products, the cleaners are so readily available in different channels. We get the call a lot where they're saying, what else can I do to my floors besides clean them? And then that gives us a chance to educate the homeowner on our finishes, and therefore the contractor coming in trying to sell the job, if they're talking Bona, then it really just helps make that complete and should be an easy sell for the contractor.
Right. So today we're going to talk about machines and abrasives because they kind of go hand in hand. And then we'll talk about adhesives. But let's start first with Bona abrasives. So one thing we'll talk about is, why is Bona even in the abrasive business, right? When we first got into it, mid-90s, we got that question a lot. And then after you guys go through, let's start with this. After you guys go through abrasives in the schools, what do you guys think? Do you see that light bulb go off where maybe they hadn't given it much thought before, and now they're like, maybe I should pay attention?
Yeah, that is true. I mean, even for myself, I remember when I, first got into the industry and I used to think, why is Bona in the abrasive business? Because we used to have those red belts that just didn't seem to last at all. And as a contractor, I used to think about abrasives as just rocks on paper. And to me, it's just like, give me an abrasive, why does it matter? But as I got educated and now being able to share that information with the contractor, it really just, every time I talk about it, we used to joke about how can you get excited about talking about abrasives, but it's really understanding how technical the abrasives can be. And it's important that we explain, our lineup of abrasives, because most guys talk about a color system, but understanding the different minerals and how they fracture based on the amount of heat and pressure, depending on what machine they're being ran on. So, for most guys, we talk about they get stuck in their ways. There may be an abrasive that they're just used to using and they really don't understand how it should be used in the system, because we always say there's more than one way to sand and finish a floor. And we're really just trying to help them understand how to, we say you're not just sanding the floor, you're creating a surface, and how the different abrasives can play a role in getting a nice smooth surface so that you're setting the stage for the seal coats and the finish coats to be applied. So I would say they definitely get it by the end. It's hard to judge some guys, gauge whether or not, it's going to cause them to switch. But I think when we actually run the machines and they see how well the abrasives work, and they talk about how much pull they feel, with certain abrasives, especially our green and platinum abrasives. I mean, I think they get it by the end.
Yeah, I think the one thing you guys do really well too is just teaching guys about the scratch, right? And understand and help them know what they're looking for. And, especially in the last, say, 10, 15 years, because right around the start of the mid 2000, maybe 2005, 2006, darker stains started coming into play more and more, and things just kept getting darker and darker and darker. Now we've got penetrating oils that also hit the market and started being more and more a part of the market. Both dark stains and penetrating oils require really precise, really fine surface preparation, which is what you were talking about. So I think helping guys understand what you said is you're not just sanding the floor, you're preparing the surface, and for what? For stain, for penetrating oil, for sealer, for finish, to sit up on top. Guys think about it a lot more.
I always try to point out too, most manufacturer cans, when it comes to oil, they do talk about screening and how a screen scratches the floor differently than, hard plating or paper, where, you want to burnish the floor if you're using water. That way you get more of that water-based seal coat and those finish coats sitting more on top and not leaving that floor too open. So yeah, understanding the grit sequence and understanding, when you should screen versus hard plating and minimizing that scratch is really important. And we try to drive that home to the students that are at the school. So Todd, I know you've been around longer than I have, and you've been at Bona longer than I have, but how did Bona get into the abrasive business?
Well, it was kind of the same story as with DCS vacuums, right? We had a need. We needed to make things look better, but we knew the vacuum manufacturers weren't worried about hooking it up to machines and keeping the dust out of the air. Same thing with water-based, especially sealers, is water-based sealers at that time were real difficult to abrade. Screening just wouldn't do it. They'd tend to gum up because they had a lot of acrylic and stuff in them. So one of the guys that we were working with at the time showed us the Scotch-Brite pads from 3M. And they originated in the automotive market, and he started using them on high-build sealer at the time, and they did a much nicer job of abrading that sealer without ripping it back open, without ripping it in the grain rays back open. And then you could pair it with some of this adhesive-backed paper to even get the abrasion even better. So, but again, we looked at the abrasive companies who were in it at the time, including 3M and Norton, and they weren't going to do anything about it. They didn't care to advance the hardwood floor sanding industry because it's such a small part of their business. Less than 1% of their total overall business. If that's your business, you're going to not invest a whole lot of R&D into it. So we started selling the maroon pads as the Bona conditioning pads, and then we got introduced, I think in 95, 96 to SIA, Swiss Industrial Abrasives. And they held a lot of the same values that we did. They weren't the biggest in the world, and neither was Bona, but they wanted quality before quantity. They also specialized in what they did, so they only made coated abrasives. They didn't make anything else. They were really good in the automotive market. They were really good in the paint market, panel work, woodworking. But we like their lab point of view. So they actually have a hardwood floor sanding lab. When we first walked in there, you'd see all the different manufacturers of floor sanders and equipment from all over the world. They had them all in there to just build products from the ground up, and that pretty much sold us. So we started selling their products as a whole, and yeah, we started out with those red belts, and they weren't bad at the time, but they definitely weren't anything innovative. But I think once we got together and started working together and telling them more of what really our customers needed, then they really started coming out with some great products, which first kicked off with Bona Blue anti-static.
I do recall, we use that a lot. I mean, we share that story a lot in regards to SIA having, a hardwood floor lab, which, we really feel is important because sometimes things can get lost in translation. But for them for us to share the information on how things work and for them to actually put that information to use with having the machines there in the lab, I think it is huge so that they can really have a good understanding as to, as part of the system, why it's important that we have the right abrasives in order to create the right scratch pattern that we're looking for.
Yeah. And then if we just look through all the innovations over the year, first, like I said, we got Bona Blue anti-static, which helps keep your machines cleaner, helps keep the floor cleaner, helps keep the air cleaner. Then we've got Platinum that they came out with, which was really aggressive, and also Bona Blue, Platinum, Bona Green, also some of the very first or really well thought out mixed mineral abrasives. So not just taking just zirconia or just ceramic or just aluminum oxide, but finally really trying to find a good mix of those products to make them aggressive enough yet still give you a fine finish. So, and then obviously diamonds, which they came out with maybe 5-6 years ago now, maybe even longer. But run us through now then, how has it changed for the contractor when we first started doing schools, right, and the abrasives we used to use, and now kind of what is the process?
So, when it comes to the sand and finish process, we do follow like NWFA guidelines, not skipping more than one grit. But, I've been amazed. There's probably a handful of contractors I ran into that really understand the different mineral selection and why that's important, because when they talk about just doing the hand detail work, they talk about not having an aggressive mineral, maybe something like silicon carbide, something that fractures in a way to where it'll maintain a scratch, but yet helps blend in, from guys that tend to palm sand versus guys that are hand sanding. It really does a great job in helping to blend in better. And so I think, like I say, the light bulb does go off when you really start diving deep into how these different minerals work with one another.
Again, take us back a little, D, when we first started doing training schools, right? And how guys tended to sand the products they used. And then especially in the last 5, 10, 15 years, how much technology has changed, and now what our typical approach is when we're sanding floors and teaching in the
Sure, yeah. It used to be, where we just had blue and maybe we had black, and guys were just using the zirconium blend throughout the whole process. And now, with the new technology, having the ceramic blend now, we have our platinum paper, which is great for, certain type floors, badly cut, badly crowned. But it's important that guys know, platinum is not an everyday type paper. It's kind of a situational paper, aluminum oxide finish, things like that. But now guys are starting out with our green and understanding how aggressive that can be, but yet smooth enough to really get things taken off of the floor. But then in order to remove that green scratch, it's important that you step down into blue, and then that'll help minimize the scratch of the green. And then from blue, depending on, if you're staining or what you're getting into, we say black is going to leave the least aggressive scratch, whether they look at it as black or gray, but it's our least aggressive scratching paper. That's important when it comes to the staining process and also the burnishing process, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So it's important that we kind of let them know why we have the different papers and what the features and benefits of those papers are in order for them to get the best results.
Yeah, I think it's just, it's come so far in, again, going back and guys just using the purple paper all the way through, or again, maybe red paper all the way through. They really didn't change things up, but again, with the advent and increase in penetrating oils and stains, especially darker stains, now we've gone back to some lighter with more grays and whites kind of working in there, or cerused floors. Those scratch patterns become even more important, and the wider planks too. I mean, they show even more than a 2 1/4 strip is going to show up. So just a lot of advances there in getting guys to understand that and what they're trying to do with those. Talk about diamonds a little bit and what those have done for both raw wood and recoats.
Yeah, that's been, I would say, revolutionary in regards to sport guys really bringing it to our attention as to how long these diamonds really last. And we always joke and say it's not the girl's best friend type of diamond, but a synthetic diamond that really maintains a nice sharp cut point. So for raw wood, guys are using it to really minimize the scratch on some of those harder species of woods. And then for recoating, it's been a game changer because the scratch is it's such a fine minimum scratch. I mean, you know, we talk about the maroon pad, which works really well, but for something that works well and lasts a lot longer, which is what the diamond does, it's really been huge in the recoats, and even, like I say, on raw wood. Not a lot of guys that I know of are using it on raw wood, but there's that situation, especially, when you get into wire brushing and you're trying to get some of the burrs out of the soft grain that the wire brush could possibly, leave in there. But diamond has been huge and a game changer. And when guys see it at the school, maybe the distributors aren't carrying it now, but they always go back and they try to get their distributors to bring some diamonds in. And because of what they see it's able to do and the longevity of that product.
Yeah, I think with diamonds, again, it's something that SIA brought to us, and it was to answer or provide a solution for pre-finished gymnasiums is where they first tried it over in Europe, because maroon pads weren't touching the pre-finished finish on there. And you don't want to put a screen on there because it just scratches the floor up too much. So that's what they first introduced diamonds for, but then the more we used them, the more we tested them out on different things. Then we found really great for between coats, great for recoating. And we've got a really good video also on our YouTube channel on screens versus pads, conditioning pads versus diamonds. And it'll give you a really good idea on the difference of that scratch pattern and the evenness also of the abrasion. Where screens just really hit the high points and really they abrade aggressively, leave a lot of scratches, but only on those high points. And then that shows through. Maroon pads abrade everything pretty nice and even, but they're just not very aggressive. If you've got hairs or debris or scratches, scuffs, wear patterns, maroon pad by itself just isn't going to take that out very easily. But the diamonds are incredible as far as how they prepare that surface, to go back to that phrase, how long they last, how well they abrade everything. In fact, they last so long that guys have had to now come up with a practice or a process. How do I make sure my guys save them between jobs and don't throw them out because they're still cutting? Yeah,
it's, we always try to explain in the school, it's not the depth of the scratch you're looking for. It's about having a lot of micro scratches in order, especially when it comes to recoating, in order to really create that nice surface area. Also, as you mentioned, screens can be pretty aggressive. And, most guys say, man, the more it powders up on me, the more I know I'm really getting good abrasion, which, that's true. You are abrading that floor pretty good, but you're also taking off a lot of that product. So the diamond abrasive, it does a great job in leaving a fine scratch. It powders up pretty good, but it's a fine talcum powder, so it's not like it's taking a lot of product off the floor. It's just that the scratch is so fine, and there's a lot more scratches that it does give you a fine talcum powder scratch or leaving that residue, which sometimes can be a little bit difficult to take off. We start showing, tacking the floor multiple times, as well as using the power scrubber also just with water to get, some of that fine dust. But it does a great job in abrading, and, as we mentioned, goes a long way. Yeah, as we talked about in the last webinar, also taking that fine dust off from the diamonds, Tampico brush tends to work real well too. So, again, there you see a lot of the innovations that we've helped come out with working together, to provide a better solution. And that's really why we kind of got into abrasives. Again, we didn't think we could,
outdo 3M or Norton. I mean, they're the big boys on the block, but we thought we could definitely, you know, Bona's goal is to provide solutions, service, and sustainability. So we want to provide solutions every step along the way of a floor's lifetime. And that's why we've got adhesives, abrasives, sealers, stains, finishes, floor care. Because the Bona guys know they know the same thing that the contractors are going through for the most part in every part of your business. You know, it doesn't help if a guy comes in who only sells finishes and all he knows how to do is put down finish, if that be. He doesn't know how to sand, he doesn't understand preparing a surface, he doesn't understand how to take care of the finish afterwards. Much like if you have just a machine salesman who only knows how to run a machine and sand that floor, doesn't know how to put down finish. Bona, we believe that we've got to know every step along the way of what you guys are doing to help innovate in every section. Because that way we can talk to you guys about your business, everything that you're going through, what changes you'd like to see, and then if it's really a change we need to make here, or because of what you're saying you need changed, actually, you know, we need to make a change in the finish, or we need to make a change in abrasives. So it's why we got into abrasives, much like finishes or DCS, is to have that focus on hardwood floors and be able to help out our customers through innovating constantly through all those different lines of business. So now we want to talk about machines, and we always get that question too on why are you guys in the machine business? And it goes back to always wanting to innovate, but also knowing it's important that if we're going to offer solutions to, again, every step along the way of a hardwood floor, then we need to know what those steps are. We need to know what those businesses are. And then on the innovation side, it was just, you know, kind of like what we saw with DCS and the vacuum manufacturers. They didn't care about water-based finish. They weren't going to make vacuums to hook up to buffers and edgers and eventually to the big sanding machines, because it didn't dawn on them of what a problem it was. And then, you know, safety, we never considered it until later on, you know, breathing the dust in. So we just wanted to continue to push the innovation, and we wanted to know the machines, know how they worked, because like we said, sanding, you can't do a good job of finishing and a bad job of sanding and have a nice job, and vice versa. Do a great job of sanding, bad job of putting the finish on, still going to have bad results. So that's kind of how we got into machines, why we stayed into it, because we thought we could push the innovation. But maybe give me some more feedback on, you know, when you were a contractor, first came into looking at and running some Bona machines, and then when you came to work for us, you know, what was your impression of Bona machines?
Sure. So, you know, when guys come to the school, I mean, first of all, you know, they always talk about what machines they run. It's almost like the big machine is kind of the flagship, you know, piece of equipment to have. And it's almost like, well, I run this machine, I run that machine. And we always get into talking about, you know, Chevys, Fords, Dodge, you know, different bells and whistles, you know, all good trucks. As a contractor myself, you know, I started out with the Pro Sand equipment, and because of the type of dust, what do you want to call it, the neck or the tube it had on there, it really didn't have a good connection to, so we always ran a bag off of it. When I started doing floors myself and took over my own business, I brought the Orebro, however you want to pronounce it. But what I liked about that is the swivel dust tube that it had. And then when they came up with the little dust tube that you can hook dust containment up to, I mean, that really, you know, was like a game changer, because now I had a nice connection. What I liked about the Bona machines is that they were all designed for dust containment. They had a nice little dust skirt on the bottom, and then learning and understanding how it's not about the CFMs, it's really about, you know, suction. And in order to have good suction or good water lift, which is a combination of CFM and the water lift, gives you good suction. I mean, it just all kind of worked out hand in hand and really made sense. So, you know, seeing some of the other machines out there, you know, they just didn't really seem to have a good DCS kind of hookup. You always had to modify it in some way. And if they didn't have the dust skirt, some were lifted kind of high in the front. So therefore, it was hard to really get good suction because you just had too much space between the floor and where that machine started. So that's what I really noticed coming in first off when it came to the different machines out there and running dust containment. I mean, even the edger, I mean, I initially brought one of the edgers that were more common in the industry, but then I wanted some of the features of being able to get up under the toe kicks and seeing that, you know, Bona had the Viking at the time, and it was great on dust containment. It got up under the toe kicks. So, you know, I appreciate having that edger as opposed to one of the more popular edgers that were out there. It just didn't work for me. I mean, it was a better fit for me. You know, being in the backyard of Bona, I mean, I've always had access to seeing all the different Bona equipment out there. Man, when we even came out with the Advantage edger, I was a big fan of it. And although by that time I was working at Bona, but I really liked how smooth that edger ran. But, you know, Bona's always been, and as you mentioned, it really allows us to, one, complete our system and to be able to put on a school where we're talking about a complete system, whereas, you know, not to knock any of our competitors out there, but sometimes they have to team up with an abrasive company because they have the machine, somebody else have the abrasives, and they have the finish. And they got to hope that those abrasives in that machine, it really works well in order to put on a good training platform, you know. So I really appreciate the fact that we have that complete system and how well it works together and how good our dust containment has been.
Hey, Dee, I'm glad you brought up the Advantage because not everything we've done has worked, right? But I got to say, at least we try, and that's, again, one reason we got into the machine business is we didn't see anybody else trying to be innovative. So, you know, the Advantage is one example. We also had a sanding machine one time called the Double 8, had 2 inline drums, and the thing was awesome. I mean, it was definitely innovative, but they were all handmade out of Italy, and we just could not get them to work consistently. If it would have worked, it would have been another game changer. But again, at least we tried. Yeah, it didn't work, and we had to pull out of that business. So the Advantage edger, you know, brushless motor, ran off of computer circuitry and stuff, but it just couldn't handle all the dust that it was exposed to every day in this industry. So I'm sure, again, it's an option or an opportunity to come back with another machine like that sometime, but it was too soon for us. We tried, but it didn't work. But that's, again, what I like about Bona is we're trying. And a lot of the stuff we've done has been very revolutionary, whether it was the atomic trailer, whether it was, like you said, the Viking edger, you know, that was revolutionary for us here in the US, is that this is a regular edger and your toe kick edger all at once. Then we kind of backed that down and made it a little shorter nose. We've also got, we used to have a planer that Orbro also made. And then we'll spend most of our time talking about, you know, our current innovations, multi-disc, power drive. Those have really changed how guys have even approached their sanding business today. So let's talk about that. First, multi-disc. When we first came out with that, how did that change the schools and how guys were looking at their sanding?
Yeah, so a lot of guys that were hard plating, and then most guys are always playing, what do you mean by hard plating? And so, you know, we used to have the double-side sanding disc. Some guys were bolting on paper to their drive plate, which was leaving kind of a fold in the middle. They were getting kind of back scratches. The multi-disc was great, you know, and I was a double-side disc guy. I used to hard plate just about every floor because it really helped get the floor flat. Although, you know, sometimes you can get some big halo scratches from that. The multi-disc really changed the game because now you have, you know, 6 5-inch discs that are spinning as they need to, you know, counterclockwise from the way the drive plate's spinning, and it's really only hitting where it needs to hit to really help flatten the floor out. But it also really minimizes that scratch, which is, again, what we're looking for when it comes to staining the floor. I mean, you really want to minimize that scratch. So, you know, most guys fell in love with it. It was a game changer, just, you know, with the pads, without the pads, different type of paper you can use. It just really helped produce a nice flat floor. Aggressive, but yet smooth. And just, you know, it got the floor flat for sure.
Yeah, something you just mentioned, I hadn't thought about it, but again, thinking back 25 years, again, when we were dealing with those types of machines and those abrasives, right? Floors were not as flat as they are now. You had a lot more dish out of the soft grain. You had a lot more undulations in the floor because we didn't have the innovations we have now. And I think the multi-disc is a good example of that. And especially again with the advent or the increase in penetrating oils, dark stains, wider and wider planks, the floors wouldn't look nearly as good as they do today using the systems and the abrasives that we have, multi-disc, power drive, a different line of abrasives to really get nice, smooth, flat floor with no scratches.
Yeah, it's, a lot of guys, even when they come to the school today, kind of going back to abrasives, they think, they have to screen every floor because that's just the way they were brought up. You screen every floor. But, and then they were using white pads to run the screen, which explains a lot of the dish out. And that was probably one of the biggest selling features I had when I was going in to sell a job to a customer. I would ask them, what don't you like about their floors? And although the floors may have looked pretty good, they all complained about the wave, which was dishing out of the soft grain. And one of the things I said is, you won't notice that after I sand and finish a floor. So I really like the innovation of the multi-disc, just, for the simple fact of, the double-side disc kind of became a little bit difficult. We also showed different variations too of, different edger discs, putting things on the bottom of the maroon pad, which still is it's a thinner pad that gives you a nice hard plate feel. And from 3-edger disc to, double-side sanding disc, but now with the multi-disc and with the different papers that we have, it really, helps a guy to be able to produce a nice flat floor. I should say there's something now that we've came out with that's even better, but, that was definitely innovative.
Yeah. And what is that? Go ahead and take it.
Yeah, the power drive. We talk about flat floors. Man, there's just no way of screwing up a floor, with the power drive and the invention of the power drive. It's, it's really, most guys said, man, guys that have been in the game for a long time sanding floors, why didn't they have that machine when I was out? It's almost like, sanding made easy. Of course you can sand the whole floor with it. It's not the fastest machine, but, we're talking quality, not quantity, and how quickly can you get something done. So, now when it comes to flat floors, a lot of contractors are, really impressed and amazed at what this power drive. There's been other machines out there that's like the power drive, but in regards to just, compact, easy to get in and out of your trailer, up and down stairs. And it's a you can use it as a buffer or as a grinding power drive type of machine. So that's been huge in helping to produce some good flat floors as well.
Yeah, what I like about power drive also is just low learning curve, right? If you go back to just having an edger sander, it would take you days, if not weeks, to teach a new guy how to use those, not screw things up, right? Leave edger scratches in the floor, leave drum marks in the floor. You can literally teach a new guy how to use a power drive in 5 minutes, turn him loose on some stuff, and not worry that he's going to screw something up. In fact, he's doing great work right away. Also lets you get in some tight spaces, closets, under pantry, shelves, reduces your edging 50 to 80%, especially against the butt-in walls. That's where all your edger marks are going to happen, where you're going to have to do all your hand sanding, your hand scraping, to get all those out, but using the power drive takes that way down. Yeah,
truly a game changer, that power drive is. Well, most people refer to it as a stand-up edger because, as you mentioned, how close it can get to the wall. Although there's still a little bit of edging that needs to be done, it definitely, minimizing the amount of edger time that your guys will have on a job site is huge, and how flat it gets the floor for sure.
And then I think you also mentioned, just the flexibility of the machine. So you can run it as the power drive, where the handle runs upright. You can also then run multi-disc on it, which, again, I know you guys teach at the schools, and I like when I'm doing a floor to switch between power drive when I'm trying to sand, per se, and then switch to multi-disc when I'm trying to fine that floor off, that final surface. And then we go back to the abrasives and being able to use Bona Black on there, switch to Bona Diamonds if we need to, intermediate pads, 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch if we need a little more cushion or conformity on the floor, steel discs, then also talk about like wire brush and the weight kit.
Yeah, so, and I've kind of, some guys feel they need more weight in order for that machine to do the job, whereas I kind of talk about sometimes just having the right abrasive on there. But when it comes to wire brushing, definitely the weight kit helps a lot in being able to really dish out or clean up that soft grain so that you can get that wire brushed effect. So, the demos we do with the wire brush, you can just see the eyes open wide when guys see that, how simple it is. And some of the other machines that used to be out there that was more the big machine, and how do you get into the corners or closer to the walls. The guys have been really amazed with what the power drive and the wire brush kit in conjunction with the weight kit and what that's been able to do. It's definitely been an eye opener, and it's always something that guys say, hey, are we going to be able to see that? You know, as we implement those, I mean, as we've been implementing them into the school, guys are anxious to see how that wire brush works.
Yeah. So that's Bona machines. And, you know, again, our system there, whether it's sanders, edgers, power drive, flexi-sand buffer, dust containment equipment, we got into it because we know we wanted to push the innovation side. Still, nobody's come out with another atomic trailer. You know, other people have followed with a multi-disc type setup, power drive type setup. But now you're seeing more of the machine companies finally starting to innovate, and we're happy to push that. But that's why we got into it, because we didn't see that happening. We knew we needed better machines for dust containment, better machines for flatter floors, better machines to help bring the industry up to go hand in hand with the abrasives, and we needed to know all sides of that business too.
Some guys even buff and stain on with it. I mean, like I say, using it as a buffer, you basically got two machines there. You know, you got the drive ability of the grinding and then sanding the floor, and then, you know, pull that handle back, and now you can switch the different drive plates out, as you mentioned. So now we're going to talk about Bona adhesives and the innovation behind, you know, why Bona got into adhesives. So Todd, if you can give us a little update on how Bona got into the adhesive business.
Yeah, you know, it comes as a surprise to a lot of people to find out that Bona's been in the business of producing adhesives since early 70s. But that's because, you know, they were producing them all in Limburg, Germany, making urethanes, moisture-cure urethanes, leveling compounds and stuff, just like, you know, all the industry was doing at that time. We never brought them over here to the US because we didn't feel we could compete in that kind of marketplace. But then something happened in the late 90s, you know, right across from actually Bona in Malmo, Sweden, Copenhagen, Denmark, at the airport there. They have a Brazilian walnut floor in the airport. It's a big parquet pattern, hundreds of thousands of square feet, and they kept having problems with, you know, individual boards popping off. And they were having issue just using regular wood flooring adhesive, trying to put those down, get them to stay. So one day, one of the maintenance guys grabbed a tube of silicone sealant that they were using on the outside of the building, and they used that. And I don't know how Bona heard about it, but we did. We went over to do a little bit of investigation because they said it worked really, really well. And that's when Bona started thinking about, could silicone or a derivative of silicone be used, that same technology be used for regular hardwood flooring industry? So they went right to work on it, and in 2004, Bona launched the first silane-based, and it's Bona silane-based adhesive in the wood flooring market. Now, to me, what's interesting about that is, again, why are we in the adhesive business? To push innovation. At that time, there were some of the other big adhesive companies who had silane-based adhesives in other parts of their business. They did not want to bring it into the wood flooring business because they didn't want to change that market, right? Well, why change a habit? Why change something up when everything's going so good? But Bona said, look, this stuff is, it's got some great advantages. One, the hold on it, its performance is just tenacious. I mean, it can really bond from the wood to the subfloors, whether it's concrete or a wooden subfloor. It maintains flexibility, which I think was one of the biggest things. Is it, you know, wood moves, it contracts and expands. Moisture-cure polyurethane adhesives don't. They get hard and they get brittle. So that really induces a lot of stress on the wood and on the adhesive as that floor is trying to move back and forth. So Bona said, this can be, you know, that's a solution for that issue. Also the amount of waste. I mean, you tell me when you guys show guys at the school about the self-sealing, well, what's the reaction?
Yeah, they're pretty amazed. I mean, not only self-sealing, how easy it peels off pre-finished boards, but the 850T is probably the first thing we started showing at the schools and talking about the features and benefits of it. using it for gluing down treads, maybe transitional pieces, nosing, things of that nature, and then explaining to them about, the liquid nails and how much liquid nails are sitting in the back of their truck that's hardened up. And so showing them how, the silane adhesives and 850T in the gun and how it self-seals itself and maintains that flexibility so that you can use later, was huge for them. And also, as I mentioned, just, the easy cleanup. So that definitely is something that stood out and at least grabbed their attention. And as you mentioned, the flexibility of it too, to allow wood to naturally move without breaking that bond and crystallizing was really a big key to really, I would say in the schools, seeing us really, get our adhesives out there into the contractor's hands and them asking, what more do we have?
Yeah, I think the easy cleanup that you mentioned too. So that was, again, a solution to a big problem in even the US market or North American market because of so much more pre-finished going in too. So if you're using moisture cure urethane and your guys don't do a good job cleaning up, right, it'll actually etch that finish. Now you got a whole nother problem. The reason you put pre-finished in is so that you wouldn't have to mess with finish. But you screw up the glue down job like that and you use a product that's gonna etch it, now you got another problem that you got to take care of with some finish on top of it. So again, we just felt like we were pushing innovation in even the adhesive market. And we're just learning so much more from it, right? And I also say it's Bona silane because just like on the water-based finish side, we have our own reactors. So we make our own silane. We don't buy it from anybody else. So that, again, lets us really specialize in what we want it to do on the floor when we know it's interacting between, say, wood and a wooden subfloor or OSB or Advantech or concrete, any of those types of subfloor materials that you might have. We can control that. If you're just buying an MS polymer from one of the big manufacturers, you don't have that control. You got to hope they build that into it, and then that you can actually then make that transfer over into being useful in the hardwood floor industry. We control that right from the beginning. So you're going to continue to see innovation, right, from Bona and Bona silane products like our 880, now with a vertical product to help with all the flooring that's being put on walls and other places. And again, all the great advantages, self-sealing, easy cleanup, that we see in our floor-based products, but now something that we can take up on the wall. And then we're looking also at, planks, and the wider and wider the planks get, whether they're solid, do you have to adjust the flexibility of the silane? Again, I think we're continuing to look at that stuff, and we'll just continue to push all of those different boundaries on what does the flooring industry really need. But because we have our own reactors, we can come up with those solutions. So Dee, talking about adhesives, moisture barriers in the schools and having a system, tell us a little bit more about how you feel teaching the classes, teaching systems to the guys, because now we're dealing with something under the floor when you're dealing with moisture barriers and adhesives.
Yeah, it's a huge risk. Because now you're dealing with something, as you mentioned, that's under the floor, which becomes a lot harder to troubleshoot. So, if you start mixing and matching different manufacturer products from moisture mitigation systems to the adhesives, and now you install that floor, the only way you're going to be able to troubleshoot if something happens is pulling that floor up. So, with our R540, which is a great moisture barrier sealer, and use in conjunction with our adhesives, we know that that's a complete system that's going to work out great. We have great adhesive managers, a team out there that, I always like seeing the innovation of, what more can we bring to the U.S. market, as you mentioned. Things starting, over in Germany and what they have over there and what we're able to bring over here. We used to have a 580, I believe, was a moisture sealer at the time. And our team was always thinking about, how can we improve it? What can be better? The 540 has been great for, not just for concrete, but for wooden subfloors. And then, we've had some other adhesives that we used to have, like maybe even 848 for engineer, but them just thinking about what's going to be the best system for, like you say, the wider plank floors and making sure we have enough moisture protection. I mean, I just really enjoy seeing what our adhesive team, what they've put together, and I enjoy having them at the schools too to really train and educate because, you know, like you say, we just got into adhesive. I mean, it hasn't been too long ago, but there's a lot of other adhesive manufacturers out there that some contractors are always, you know, wanting to make that comparison. So it's nice to have that adhesive team that knows about some of the different things that our adhesive contractors are looking for. So just say our flooring contractors that look for when it comes to a good moisture mitigation system and adhesive.
Yeah. And it all goes back, I think, to, again, what I said Bona's goals is solutions, right? And that's why we've got to be in all these businesses, so we know the contractors, the professionals, the craftsmen's business every step of the way. We can learn from them, they can learn from us, we can help the whole thing get better. And then service, right? If something does go wrong and you're using Bona products all the way through, then we have a better chance of helping you understand what happened, helping you come up with a solution to that, and understanding so it doesn't happen again. And then sustainability. You know, one other thing with our adhesives, and it's just like with our finishes, we have the only adhesive, Bona adhesive on the market that's Green Guard Gold certified. So more and more homeowners, more and more floor owners, more people around the world are very concerned about indoor air quality. And a lot of guys think, well, it's hidden under the floor, you know, even if it smells a little bit, you know, you can't see it, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But to us, it's like, no, we want greener, safer products, not only for the guys installing it, but also for the homeowners. It's a great selling point because everybody's more concerned about that air quality from all the stuff that's being used in their homes. And so for Bona to go ahead and make sure that the quality of product that they're putting together is going to be able to pass those Green Guard standards is something that nobody else has done.
Yeah, good point. I had a call come in today, and luckily I had Trey available to help me out, but it was a guy who wanted to use our R540, but then he wanted to use somebody else's adhesive over that. And, you know, as Trey mentioned, I mean, you know, we're all about, you know, what I like about our systems is that, you know, we really want the contractor to be successful. I mean, having to rip out a floor because we don't know the compatibility of somebody else's adhesive, you know, with our sealer or vice versa. I mean, it's all about sticking to a proven system that works. And as you mentioned, that way, you know, they can rest assured that now, you know, if it came to troubleshooting, if it's all Bona, it makes it easier for us to do that. So it's great to have a system.
Yeah. So, hey, we hope you guys got a lot out of what we had to talk about today with machines and abrasives and adhesives. As you can see, Bona is always going to push the envelope of innovation and force innovation out there. I don't know if there's any other lines of business that we can get into, but again, machines, abrasives, adhesives, they weren't core lines for us for quite a while, but I think since we've been into those lines of business, at least from my experience of being around Bona for so long, we've really pushed the envelope, not only for the industry, but we've forced other manufacturers to also get innovative and follow our lead, maybe even come out with better products. And that's just, it's better for everybody to have that going out there. So we're going to cut now to some live Q&A. We want to see what other questions you have. So please type those in, and Dee and I will get right to those in 1 minute.
So we're going to go right into our first question. If you had not had a chance to type in your question, you can do so during this live Q&A time. So first question is, so I've been using the Bona Blue abrasives all the way through since you introduced them. Am I doing anything wrong? So using the Bona Blue abrasives throughout your whole sanding process, it's not a problem with that, but as technology has changes, I mean, we got new type of minerals, new abrasives. You can probably produce a better floor, you know, if you're using our green, blue, and then black system. And we can definitely get into that a little bit more in detail. But using Bona Blue is not, there's nothing wrong with doing that. You're just using the same mineral throughout that whole sanding process. And as long as you're not skipping too many grit sequence, you'll still be able to produce a pretty good floor. Next question. What do you mean about self-sealing abilities of the Bona abrasives? So I think as I talked about in the video, with our Bona adhesives, I should say, I think I said abrasive adhesives, it comes with a foil tin that's in the pail. And by putting that foil, I should say foil back over the pail, what that does is it helps reseal the adhesive so that you don't get a lot of air flow into the bucket. And then you end up having some of the adhesives will start to, dry out with a little bit of moisture that may be in that air. It'll cause it to skim over. So in order to minimize the waste, it's highly recommended that you put that foil back in so that it'll reseal itself so that you minimize the waste. Also with our 850T, it's the same thing with, the, what do you want to call it? The stem? What is that called? The stem part of the 850T. There's a better name for that, Todd. Help me out there.
Nozzle.
The nozzle. All righty. With the nozzle part of that 850T, what happens is it'll self-plug itself so that you don't have a lot of waste when you're using that 850T. If you think about your days of using contractor adhesive or liquid nails, those tend to get hard over time, especially if they've been sitting in your van for a while. So what's good about the 850T is that it will self-seal itself. Therefore, it'll minimize how much waste you'll have. And there may be a small plug in the top of that nozzle that you can just pull out. Some guys will use a drywall screw to pull out that plug, and then you can continue to use that adhesive. Thank you, Todd.
You got it. Anytime.
All righty. Next question is, what is the difference between running 4-disc power drive plate and the 6-disc multi-disc? Are they doing the same thing? I believe is the question. So, with the power drive, it's more of a grinding machine. I guess there's 3 things. One, you have 2 different size discs. The power drive is a 6-inch sanding disc, and it's going to rotate. It's gear driven, so it rotates. I don't know the numbers right offhand, but it'll definitely rotate differently than the 5-inch multi-disc. So it's definitely going to be cutting the floor differently. Power drive's more of a grinding, really, cutting the floor. And whereas the multi-disc is more floating, like you're, buffing the floor. So you have 6 independent heads that will spin, I should say, independently. As the main drive plate goes around, it really cuts where it needs to. So it's more of I would call it more of a blending type of tool to help kind of blend in your different machines, from your big machine to your edger or your power drive and edging. It'll kind of help blend all that in, although the power drive will get close enough to the wall, but it's definitely cutting differently. So the speed at which it spins, the type of abrasive you may be running, it's going to give you a different cut. Whereas, the power drive, again, it's grinding, it's cutting, and it's spinning differently speed-wise versus the FlexiSand and versus your big machine. So you got, several different machines and your edger spinning differently. So, between those 2 machines, it's definitely going to give you a different look. So they do different things for sure. Anything you want to add there? Get that covered?
Covered that well.
Thank you, my friend. I always got to lean on you there. I feel like I was babbling a little bit. All right, next question is, how about blending the edges and detailed areas with a random orbitable sander? Any watch outs there to avoid picture framing? That's a great question. I've seen that happen, back in my contracting days, whereas that, when you're using a random orbiter, it's going to spin a little bit differently, and kind of what I was explaining too, you got different machines that's going to cut the floor differently, even if it's with the same abrasive, or, you end up with Bona Blue maybe on your power drive, and then maybe when you do your random orbital, you use in black paper. So you got 2 different type of papers. What the recommendation would be, if you're going to random orbit, you do that first before you get into your multi-disc. That way you can get as close to the wall as you can with your random orbital. Yeah, orbital. And then you'll go over it with the multi-disc to kind of help blend in, because it's going to give you a different scratch because it's spinning at a different speed. And so that would be my recommendation there. All righty.
I got something to add. Please. What guys might do is also take, if they typically tend to end with, say, multi-disc with 100 grit black on it, right? As a little experiment, they can run that out in the middle of their field. And then they can take their random orbit sander with 100 grit black, so same thing that they ran on multi-disc, and run it at the different speeds, because a lot of guys have the multi-speed random orbits too, so it's 1 to 6. So run it at each of those different speeds out in a little area out in the field, and then see what blends best. Obviously, don't do this right in the middle of a customer's floor, maybe on your test panel back at your shop or in your house. But you got to know your equipment, and just because you're using the same grid of abrasive doesn't mean it's going to finish and or stain the same. But that's one way they can kind of match up better, their random orbit machine with their multi-disc, what they're finishing the field with, what they're finishing the edges with, to see what matches up the best.
Yeah, great point. And I know some of the cheaper random orbital, they leave little J hooks, and also to what Todd mentioned too, which kind of made me think about that, is a lot of guys have moved up into like the Fest tool, where you have the different speeds you can set that at, which most guys say that tends to work a little bit better. So what Todd mentioned, know your equipment and make sure you just know exactly what kind of scratch you're leaving and how well it's going to blend that in. All righty, next question. Does silane hold better than moisture cure urethane adhesives? And I'm going to turn that over to Todd, and he has a good example of that.
Yeah, as we were talking, I think when we first came out with silane adhesives, I was down at a NWFA school, and they were asking questions about it because it was the first silane that people had seen in the marketplace. So usually they go through the process where you got to take your edger, you got to edge the concrete off because you got to get that sealant and everything else off there, open up to some fresh concrete. And they said, well, will your stuff stick on top of the concrete if we don't do anything to it? I said, I don't know, let's try it. So we just took a single piece of flooring, glued it down, left it overnight, came back the next day and took a hammer, tried to get it off, and we were hitting it, and it wasn't moving. And so we kept beating on it. It finally came off, and chunks of concrete came out with it. So it's not that we would recommend that guys then skip prepping their concrete the right way. You still need to get off that sealant. You still need to expose fresh concrete. But I think since then, the feedback that we get back from contractors who are using silane all the time is the hold on it is tenacious. I mean, it's unbelievable. In fact, I don't want to have a problem with the silane because I know it's going to pull up concrete. It's going to do stuff to my wood subfloor. So know what you're doing with it because it has unbelievable hold.
Man, that's a great example. And also, with silane versus, silane versus urethane, urethanes tend to harden over time and can kind of crystallize similar to liquid nails. So with the silane base, you're also, it has great hold, as Todd just explained, but it's also going to allow for that board to move if there's any kind of, seasonal movements, expansion or contraction. So good point. Thanks, Todd. All right, next question. Let's see. How about working on a different species? Do I change my approach with abrasives and grit choice? Well, when it comes to different species, we always say in the school, not every floor is sanded like an oak floor. So when you get into some of your harder species and some of your softer species, it is going to be important that you change up your sanding sequence, or I should say your grit sequence, and make sure that, like on a softer species, your paper may tend to clog up faster. Let's say on the pines, heart pine, regular pine, cypresses. I mean, you might want to move the machines a little bit faster, and I wouldn't get too aggressive on your softer species. That way you have a chance to really, you're not grinding on it, and now you're having to make multiple cuts to get that scratch out. Whereas in regards to your harder species, you want to make sure that, sometimes you may not want to skip a grit because you can get too aggressive on that, maybe starting out with green, which is what we typically recommend on most species, especially oaks. Green may be a little bit too aggressive and leave a deeper scratch in that harder species. Or if you're going to start with green, you definitely want to make sure you're probably not skipping a grit and maybe removing that green scratch out with the blue scratch. So definitely, it's important. One of our commandments, know thy species. And, if you're sanding a species for the first time, you may want to, document, exactly what way worked better for you. But definitely keep in mind, softer species, easier to scratch, harder species, harder to get that scratch out when you are sanding that floor. Good question. All righty, let's see. Next question. Oh, Dylan Moore decided to write a paragraph here. Thanks, Dylan. All right, from Dylan, a good BCC contractor of ours. He says, my company pushes and urges customers to stay in the same product line. We have successfully adapted. Can you give me some water, please? No, I'm just kidding. Successfully adapted sales for adhesives as Bona has come out with the new products. Unfortunately, nowadays with the internet and customers' ability to, to get that knowledge online, we have run across customers wanting more. Was that cerused? Is that the word in there?
Yeah.
Thank you. More cerused products, which become popular in other manufacturers. Is Bona planning down the line for some of these products? Well, we're always working on something. And now that I read all of that, I think it was more of a ceruse type of product. You can do some cerusing with our craft oil. We definitely talk about that in the schools. But as far as any other type of product lines, I know some guys are, staining, lightly abrading the stain off, and then maybe adding another color stain as a way of cerusing. But I really can't make any comparisons to some of the other manufacturers that have things out there because I'm just not too familiar with it.
Yeah, I would just say if there's something that you guys want and need and you really see a bigger trend for it in your area, talk to your territory manager about it, get a hold of product management here at Bona. We know there's a lot of different things that tend to trend regionally, and we may not come out with a product for every little thing that's out there because one, we may not be the best at doing that, coming out with that particular kind of specialty product. It may not be commercially viable for us. So, but as long as you keep feeding us those ideas, we'll keep pushing them up to product management and see what makes the most sense for Bona to continue to come out with products and get out there for you guys.
Thanks, Todd. All right, well, that concludes our Q&A session. I appreciate you guys sticking around and appreciate the questions that you guys have sent in. Keep in mind we have a podcast on the floor with Wayne and Rob that I highly recommend for more contractor tips, best practices, and just a whole host of information from not only those two guys, but they also have special guests. Also, please follow us on our Bona Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And with that, we'll definitely look forward to bringing you another webinar here in the near future. Thanks again.